LeRoi Jones walked in there, you know, he was just this nice guy, and we started talking about Kafka, because I was reading America, and we never stopped talking until after we got married, and then how married people, they don't talk to each other anymore. I was the one who interviewed him. This guy walks in, and the funny part of it was the editor ducked out on me. He said, "Somebody's coming to be interviewed, and you're so good at this, and you're so personable, and blah, blah. I'm leaving, you do it." I said, "Oh, that's just wonderful. Thank you very much." So in comes this funny short guy with a widow's peak, and it didn't surprise me at all that he was a black guy who was applying for a job at a record magazine. Why not? And he saw me reading this America, and then we immediately started talking about Kafka and literature and this and that. And then the editor walked back in and said, "Oh, hello, and did you interview him?" And I hadn't. We had just been talking. Well, we were friends before we really became lovers, and that, I think, is one of the better ways to get to know somebody. He had a girlfriend, I was dating somebody else, and then it just happened, you know? Well, he was very smart. He was very funny. People were at a loss, asking me, "What does he mean, LeRoi? What does he mean he's saying, 'Oh, Damballa, murder my friends in their beds'?"
Choke my friends in their bedrooms with their drinks spilling, and restless for tilting hips or dark liver, lip-sucking splinters from the master's thigh. Black scream and chant scream and dull, unearthly hollering data, bilious what ugliness.
They were so outraged and so upset, more upset than angry. Maybe outrage is not really the best word to use there, because they really were more upset than angry. And I felt that I was being asked to answer for him, and I couldn't. But something had happened to me in the act of bearing black children. Something had happened to me to see much more than your average white girl. I couldn't hold LeRoi to me that was one of the reasons I couldn't hold him to me and say, you're walking away from a marriage, you're walking away from a commitment, you're walking away from everything you said you believed in. I felt that the situation that black people faced in this country was so extreme and so their whole lives so unrealized, and they were so marginalized, that the prospect of that happening to my children filled me with a great dread. And especially since they were girls, I saw the difficulties that LeRoi's sister had in trying to establish a career. And I knew it would have to get worse before it got better. And I knew that if my personal happiness was on the line, that I was going to have to see that in terms of a larger good. But I couldn't explain that position to the people who were offended by his poem. They were bereft that he'd gone uptown. And I couldn't explain how I felt about it to them, because my position was different. Anyway, he went to Cuba in, early on, 1960. And that was the same year that you could watch on television the lunch counter sit-ins. All of that began to weigh on him. He wrote that essay, Cuba Libre, but you couldn't help but look around and see what was going on down south. And then when Malcolm X started speaking, and everyone, and you know, I can't pretend to speak for young black men at the time, but what from my observation, all the young lions felt that this was someone who was speaking for Northern people as well as whatever Martin Luther King faced. This is not to say that King was not our hero as well. But when all the marching and everything resulted in nothing, and we're talking really, talking the early 60s, I think he got angry just like anybody would. And then what could have been the defining moment, I really don't know. There's a poem in which he said, all the things I never wanted came back for me to love them. Old social songs, racial songs, and then the poem goes on. I think after Malcolm died, he felt he could go to Harlem and be Malcolm, but that wasn't, you can't just walk in somewhere. You can't.